This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For January 2022, it's 2022, folks. It's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. It's a new year. It's a new show. We're going to do a show for you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to everybody. This is our first official show of 2022. My name is Chris Decter. I'm joined today by Mark, Justin, Jamie, and Larry.
Yo.
And on today's show, we're going to discuss, this sounds fantastic, but deliberately, we're going to discuss operational training of teaching in hybrid learning spaces. Mm-hmm. We're also going to discuss the results of our first ever technology on trial.
Second.
But no, that was the first one.
And we did a pilot of it earlier in the year.
Not to the
this
same.
was the first good one, but we did do a pilot of it earlier.
The first full
debate.
Define good. Yeah, what is
we're
good?
going to technology on
success.
trial about the technology on trial segment that's coming up next.
Guilty.
So,
And it's just like we ignore the first one.
we're gonna do the news.
The news.
So this article comes from the I guess it's the Hecking report. The Heckinger report.
It was embedded in another large scale email that just got
Mark, this is your fault.
extracted
You
out
found
of it.
it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was in the cracks of the internet somewhere.
We'll put the link below. It's the Heckinger report. They should come up with a cool buzzwordy name that's like some fake word that doesn't actually exist. But anyway,
They did. It was Heckinger. You just didn't.
Heckinger. No, I'm pretty sure that's based on someone's name. But anyway, the crux of the article is the title is Facing an Existential Crisis. Some colleges do something rare for them. Adapt. Which is
the key word was existential crisis. I think I probably even said that on the show at least once before.
Well, and so it's an interesting article, and basically what it talks about is they look at a couple of very small schools, so you have to, take it with a giant grain of salt. But it's the schools that are recognizing that as enrollments are decreasing in a lot of their programs, and in other programs they're increasing, but they're having trouble justifying the existence of a lot of these programs, or even the existence of the school itself, and so they're having to respond to student demands and come up with highly customized programs and highly customized spaces to support those programs, as opposed to your generic classroom where you have 40 seats and a screen at the front and a lectern, and you can teach anything in there. It doesn't matter. So, but it's an interesting thing where it talks about how schools might need to adapt in order to survive the demands from students that they want very customizable spaces to go along with their specialized programs. So what do you guys think?
Which I think that is a trend that we've been hearing and kind of speaking about offhandedly for a little while now, the fact that smaller schools have got to adapt, and sometimes they are. In the last 6 months, I've had two conversations, one of them just over this holiday, right before the holiday break. And one of the benefits they have is that their classroom situation is almost more like a secondary high school, right? Where this teacher, that really is their classroom. They're really the only ones that teach there, because there's not 4,000 classrooms. There's not 4,000 teachers. It's almost a one-to-one thing. And what they're doing is they are over-specializing that room to be the best in that one thing. Because I was shocked. And then this one conversation was about a classroom they wanted to do for mathematics, but it was also hybrid or high flex. And one of the things they wanted to get over was the fact that this room is basically a giant whiteboard everywhere. And in the advanced mathematics courses, they use feet for equations. They use the linear feet for equations, and even paper. They would use 6-7 pages of paper to work out these equations. And they were looking for one of the whiteboard camera systems that would stitch together like 16 feet of whiteboard so that they could share it, and then a pan and scan almost, so that you could go back and forth across. And I was like, you really are going to do this? And they said, well, yeah, this is our math lab. Like, this is the only thing they do in here is teach advanced mathematics. It might be 3 teachers, but that's the only place that course will ever be held. And I thought it was amazing, but I think some of these smaller schools do have that kind of flexibility to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
Where some of the larger schools, they don't have the flexibility to adapt because advanced math might be in 8 different buildings today.
We see a little bit of
very
that.
Interesting.
Yeah, we've been through some of this over the past years. We've had to cut programs based upon attendance, and they're always looking at what is succeeding and what is not. And with your example, Jamie, I know this one faculty professor that pretty much wants the same thing in their classroom, because that's the only classroom they teach in, but other teachers teach in there. So it's a push and pull, and it's a fight, because not every teacher can use this technology. So they have a hard time investing thousands of dollars for this one teacher to use that, even though it would benefit the students in that person's class. So yeah, we're seeing a little bit of it.
They really are banking on the fact that if they have the best experience, then people will default to them.
Well, even if they pick a couple things, right? These smaller institutions, they don't have as broad of an offering out there. But if you're going to look at yourself in the mirror and say, well, what am I good at? Where is my enrollment at? I want to do those things the best, right? And so if it's your math, science, or whatever it is, well, double down on that. Like, make that experience, like, own it. Own that that's what you want. And then one of the quotes from this article is like, we all need to look at, what does an 18-year-old want? If somebody's interested in a specific career path and they want to go to the school that does that thing, well, they'll go get that thing, right? And so, but how does that correlate with what we always talk about all the time, like with standard spaces and yada, 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 serving all this stuff? It doesn't, right? Like, you've got to like embrace that edge case now. And like, how do you do that one-off thing really, really well? And who supports it? And where does that now fall? Because if we're going to start seeing these very specific, highly technically created spaces, who's going to end up taking care of all of that stuff?
Sounds like we're leading into XR, huh?
Maybe.
XR discussion. Larry?
And well, what Mark said, I think, is interesting. And what I took from this article was, I'm not sure I completely agree with the motivations and some of the reasons they did it. What does an 18-year-old want? Well, they want animation and gaming. So let's give them that. But what I really, really like, and the reason I think these small schools might have an easier job of changing for the new dynamic, is they are able to pinpoint who they want to be, how they're going to be known, what they're going to be known for. And they're going to go full force into those particular things. And that will help them survive. Where we've talked about it before. Is there a room for the generalist in the future? Well, maybe that goes beyond just the technicians and everything else. Is the small school generalist still a thing? Or are you going to have to choose what you're going to be known for and develop your spaces around that particular thing?
It's owning your product, right? Owning your brand and what the mass recognize from you. Like, if you're a school that specializes in this thing, I would hope when I go to that class that is that thing, it better be amazing. Like, it better be like over the top, like engaging. And it better not just be like a black and white PowerPoint on a screen and I'm sitting at the back of a room squinting, trying to find out what the content is. Like, I would expect even the instructors delivering that content are going to be on top of it and really engaging, because guess what? That's what the 18-year-old wants. If they don't get it,
that might drive the a la carte idea in the future, where you'll take some courses about this particular thing from this university and some courses about this particular thing from that university, because that's what they're known for.
And I think some of the adaptions are forced because it's adapt or close. My neighbor works for one of the local private colleges, and they are in that boat. They're right there of, we need to find a way, because trying to compete with MU or KU, and where they offer for 50,000 students, if they lose a program, BFD, right? Who cares? I mean, people care, but right? But if the local university, the local church-funded private university loses a department,
it's more impactful.
That's a fifth of their income, and they might as well just shut the door. And so that's what they're talking about is yes, they are jumping on these bandwagons, and it is basically buying a lottery ticket to get yourself out of debt. And some of them are going to succeed and some of them aren't, and it'll be really interesting. But I hope a lot of them do succeed, and I hope we see that start spreading around, because I do think there's a lot of opportunities here, and we've talked about that a lot.
Well, I think that what I take away from this whole article here is that premise, that there's the pivot. It's like, whoa, we can't just say, here's what we have, take it or leave it, because guess what? They'll leave it and they'll go somewhere else, and you have to respond to what the student wants. And if these kids want an experience, and some of the presentations I sat in earlier on this week where we talked about what are students really asking for, overwhelmingly they want flexibility. They want the option to come to class when they can, but if they can't, they want remote capability. And they're not asking for one or the other. They want the flexibility to be able to do either, right? And so in a lot of universities, that makes people real queasy. Like, well, wait, you didn't sign up for an online class, so why would I offer it to you? And that you're missing it. You're missing the point, what the students are asking for. They want the flexibility, and the students, and the faculty and everybody has to listen, to the upper leadership. It's not good enough to just have a thing, take it or leave it. If you want to survive this, you're going to have to innovate, right? Quoting here, numbers are undeniable. You have to innovate your way off this demographic cliff. Is that, what are you doing that makes your student experience better than somewhere else, that you're going to attract the students there? Because you're not the only game in town. People can go spend their money wherever. Like, why should they come to your university and have an experience there? Because if you're not giving them exactly what they want, guess what? They'll just walk down to the next offering. So.
And it's way too easy to click on the next place. It's just way too, especially test optionals, especially basically if you're willing to write a check, they're going to accept you in. It's just
they're all
way
competing
too
after
easy to move.
A more shallow pool, that it's shrinking, right?
I think that's
size.
why we're rolling the dice and saying, you know what? We asked our students and they want to be in person. So that's what we're going to give them. We're not going to give them hybrid or high flex. And that's a gamble.
So, in your spaces, you guys have like really nice, comfortable like theater seats. I'm assuming now, like you make that in-person experience amazing.
They're wood chairs with no backs. You sit there.
Most of them, yeah. Steel case sprinkled here and there. Whatever.
Well, not steel case. They are made of steel cases.
Yeah, from 1975.
Concrete
unground
floor.
rivets. Just like sit out, learn.
So yeah, it's a gamble.
It's interesting to think about this, not from the, we talked about a lot from the virtual, the online, the hybrid stuff, but even in like the physical spaces, we've just spent the last 18 months, 2 years, whatever, and we've talked about this a couple of times, jamming as much hybrid technology into classrooms, but for the most part, they're pretty much all the same. We're kind of still using that same model. So as we look at, okay, it's been 2 or 3 years, it's been 3 or 4 years, whatever that is. So a year or two from now, when you start looking at potentially starting to do some light refreshes on those spaces, how many get a little more specialized based on this sort of feedback to say, okay, yes, we need to do in-person and hybrid and high flex and all that, but it's not the same model camera, same model DSP, same type of displays, same layout of the rooms. Some of these rooms need more specialized technologies, more specialized layouts, more specialized furnishings and fixtures to tie in with the more specialized teaching they're doing in these specialized programs, because I think you're right. We're going to see this sort of general, and I'm talking a very high level, but general feedback coming from students to say, I don't want just yet another choice. Even if I do just go to state school, I don't want just the same choice of those 40 majors. I want to do something in this, but I want parts of this program and parts of that program. You see a lot of people building those independent studies and those kind of customized degree programs, and they're going to probably need customized spaces to support that. So something to be thinking about. We're probably a year or two at the earliest from that conversation, but 3 or 4 years from now, when you do a building of 40 rooms, they're not just going to be 40 identical rooms. There'll probably be, there's 20 of them that are like that, but these 5 are like this, and these 3 are like that, and these 6 are like this, because that's what you're going to need to support some of those programs.
So the question I have for like everybody here, like we know that you have faculty that will push the edge, right? And they want to do something that's like, hey, I'm going to try this thing and whatever. And I'm interested to kind of, what is the response around the room here that, do you find ways to look for opportunities from them to be able to do that? Or is the canned response, well, you're in this kind of space, this is the way you have to do it? Because I'm kind of on this crusade this year to find out, like, forget what I've done for you in an offering. If you could have this any way, how would it be? I know you make it work as such now because we gave you this base tool set, but if we were going to re-envision this right now, because at the end of the day, if we want to have these faculty who are going above and beyond and engaging and keeping these students and making our institutions known for the special thing that it is, we have to unchain these folks and let them do what they need to do best. And how do we go about that?
Yeah, that works really well at WKU. For example, solely based upon how we're funded. Each department pays for their own classrooms, no matter what. There's no central fund for a standardized classroom. So they're the ones holding the money, and they're, if I bring something crazy back to my boss to say, hey, the music people want to do this crazy piano lab with this matrix switching and this audio and these headphones and doing all this stuff, and that's what they want to do. Oh, you don't want me to design that? Then you go argue with them, right? They have the money. I got to design what they want, and we have to be able to support that. So I've got to figure out ways to put in similar product that we're used to supporting, but it still meet their needs. That happens quite a bit at Western, more so than the standard room discussion even.
Well, and we're kind of similar, except for we are centrally funded, but we're looking for champions. And I've recently had conversations with 2 different colleges where they want to roll out pilot programs for specialized high flex spaces, because they're looking at the numbers. And just like Mark said, more of their students want the flexibility. And so we're willing to engineer and give them spaces that meet their exact needs, because, we look at this too. And as much as we can solve the technology aspect of this discussion is so dependent upon the instructors, the learning design team, the facilities, like so much outside of our control, that if we're going to be successful, we need to look for opportunities where people are already on the right track and support them as much as we can.
And that's been the biggest challenge. Like if it's a new thing, then chances are we're trying to reach out and find that person, right? Or try to find that specialty and use as much of the standard stuff as we can, but force it in there. Now, when it gets interesting is that I think we're all guilty of, we over-engineer and then we kind of make it basic. And I've found on several occasions where when I get wind of that person, whoever that is, whatever style they're teaching in, and I find out that they're frustrated because they want X, Y, and Z, there's a lot of times where I can say, oh yeah? Give me a couple hours, right? Watch this. And now we are customizing a room to fit their needs as much as we possibly can. Or I sneakily around the corner, create some other space and say, okay, well, hey, now that I know what you're doing, I'm putting in this new room over here. I'm going to accidentally put in all the stuff you're asking for, and you request that one next semester, right? To kind of work the system a little bit. But nobody seems to complain, right? Even administration, nobody seems to complain because they know that it's going to be used well. But it can't ever be just everybody gets accustomed. But man, try really hard, especially for those people. I just can't find them very often. Usually how I find them is it's an advanced trouble ticket and they're already pissed, right? So they're already mad because by the time it's got to me, it's 3 and 4 deep. And those are the people that are hard to find. Yeah. I wish there was a better way to do that.
No, they're out there. Find them. Get them involved. And, we focused a lot on the 80% rooms. And I think this 20% specialty case is going to, the pendulum of focus is going to swing back to these unique locations again. And I think we all get excited about these, like trying new things. Like, we can sit there and specialize, but these new edge pieces, that's where we want to be. That's where we want to, team up with these faculty members and create that exceptional experience for the students. And that's, to me, that's what we really, really strive for.
Larry, a minute ago, you mentioned that we've got the technology side of things pretty well figured out. And, Jamie, to your point, if they want something special, we can build that for them. It's not a huge deal to do it. But the other half of that equation is the pedagogy, the teaching, the use of those rooms by the instructor. And we're going to talk about that right after this.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higheredav.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV SuperFriends style. That's AV SuperFriends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts from.
So as we talk about custom spaces, as we talk about the future of spaces, if we talk about, okay, we did the phase 1 hybrid high flex learning, I'll put cameras and microphones in rooms, done, but they're the same old rooms. Even with that, we're still running into issues, and we get feedback a lot from people who have trouble kind of physically operating those things. Like from an operational standpoint of how do I drive this room? I have to worry about my curriculum. I have to worry about, I'm taking from the instructor, from the teaching and professor standpoint. I have to worry about my curriculum. I have to worry about class management. I've got to get the lessons ready for today. I got my presentations. I got all these things. Plus I have to drive these cameras and switch the microphones and unmute stuff and do this. And it's becoming this, all these additional things I need to worry about as I just want to teach my history course or my physics course or my biology course or whatever. And all of our schools have a department. They're the Center for Teaching and Learning or the Teaching and Learning Center or whatever they are. The instructional design side, who often works very closely with instructors on curriculum development. And over the last year, 2 years, they've been working on them on how do I create teaching, or how do I modify my curriculum so that it works best in a hybrid environment. But what they don't talk about is the operational side of now, how do I actually integrate the use of this technology in the most appropriate way? And sure, they can call IT and the AV group to come over and show them which button do I physically push, but it's kind of, there's a gap there. We're not covering that spread between building my curriculum and developing it so it works well online or in hybrid. And then also, I know what buttons to push to make things go, but how do I, there's like fundamentally there's a missing step there. Mm-hmm. And Mark, you brought it up that it's not enough to just simply deploy the tools. We almost have to like, if is that really our responsibility as the IT and AV group to do that? Is that the responsibility of the teaching and learning folks who are working on that, or how do we fix that? But it's becoming a thing. Again, we're kind of moving this from this quantitative, build as much stuff as you can, to the qualitative. How can I make this work better for people? Yeah, which is good. I mean, this is natural progression. But what do we see on this?
Historically, like there's that chasm between, right, and that as IT has like proliferated, and we've all kind of got these alignments, like at the core, like they're delivering tools, right? But a pile of tools does not equate to an experience. Like that's not. And so when we talk about what is it to be successful in the teaching and learning environment, it's not just putting a bunch of tools in a room. That's not success. And so how do we get our faculty engaged so that they can do the right thing with those tools? And I think where it gets weird is that these organizations, these CTL groups and the like that you've mentioned, they themselves are not professionals in the tool sets. They're like the pedagogical definitions and like the approaches, but that's not where the rubber meets the road. Like that's the approach and the perspective of that. But where do people train to become fluent with the tool sets that we are deploying, which we think is going to give them success, but we're not 100% sure. And so how do we bridge that chasm? How do we get there? And who needs to be at the table?
It's been really interesting because when we talk to the teaching and learning folks, they know like the theory, because a lot of these tools, a lot of these aspects, they've been there, but they're the 2% of online over the last 10 years. And now in the last 2 years, it's 80, right? And so they have the theories down, like, well, you should do this and you should do that. And you should make sure you engage and you should try to see the student. You should, okay, great. We all got that. And now comes the tools. I think where some of the folks that I've had the most success with is because when you come to it and are the ones that have been involved with theater or ones that have been involved with something of the movies or TV or whatever, because now they understand that there are restrictions with microphones and TV cameras and monitors, because they've been in that environment. They know that in a normal classroom where it's just the people there and you decide to walk to the back left corner and the back right corner and do jumping jacks in the middle of the room and do twisty twirls, and it's teaching math, who cares? They're not used to having the constraints of what sometimes our technology makes them use, even though we attempt to do auto tracking and we attempt to use student microphones. I have found the most success in kind of relating that to actors and actresses. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember when I did this play in 5th grade. You can't just walk off the stage. You know, there's a restriction there. There's a wall. And that's how you get the best performance. And they seem to grasp it more. And I don't know if it's because we kind of already understand the restrictions of cameras and microphones and such. So we get stuck in this training position that we should not be in. We should not be teaching the teachers, but we're teaching the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And
coaching them.
And I kind of look at it too, like I'm dabbling in like woodworking, right?
Mm-hmm.
I made some desks over COVID, and I made a monitor riser, and I'm really bad at it. I've been trying to get good tool, right? I've been trying to get good tools, and I've been trying to learn how to do it. And then I found out that I'm not really good at it. So I go look up a YouTube video. I'm like, oh, damn.
It makes you feel like you're really bad at it.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, well, I wish I'd have watched this before I did this thing, because then I wouldn't have made that mistake. And I think that it's the same thing here. You know, they now have all these tools. Great. I had all the saws. I had drills. I've used these things before, but poking a hole in drywall and poking a hole in a hard piece of hardwood is two very different things. And I had the tools. I had the knowledge. I know how to use it. But do I?
One of the things I'm pretty happy about here at UNCG is the way our department is structured. We're under learning technology, which is in IT. We work for learning technology, but we're classroom technology within learning technology. There's a group inside learning technology that does a phenomenal job. They're almost pseudo instructional designers. That's really where they came from with their history, but they're focused on the tech side. And so whenever we do training in a room, they typically do it. Although since I've been here, I've been trying to do more tag team just so my guys get experience with the language, with understanding of concepts, of the pedagogical side of things. But that group works really well for teaching not only the tool set, but the why, and making that bridge between the two. However, like even when that happens, we're still stuck in a situation where in these really complex high flex rooms, no matter how much we automate them, we're asking the instructor to focus on the students in the room, the students out of the room, and the technology to drive everything. And so I've been reaching out to other universities and to people at my university that do that well. And I found a really interesting concept is a lot of them are either teaching in teams, doing a tag team where one person teaches and the other one drives the technology and pays attention to the students not in the room, or they have teacher's assistants or something like that. It's almost as if you have two spaces and you dedicate a teacher to both spaces. One's virtual, one's in person, but it helps to keep everyone engaged and everyone involved.
Yeah, sure.
I really like that. And before we go on with that, I have a quick question on the training part. Do you all train your first level support techs in how to use, not how to use them, but best practices in all of this hybrid teaching? Because what I find is that the ones that show up every day, the first level techs show up and they're like, I want to do this thing. And they're like, well, the camera works. And then that's it. That's where it sits. Mm-hmm. Do you go out of your way to train those folks as well as the teachers? Because they are they're sometimes my gap, right? I understand the principles, but do they all?
It's important because let's zoom out just a smidge here.
And I want to go back to Larry's thing.
Yeah, I want to go back to Larry's thing.
I really like that.
Because the piece, I think it's going to come back into there, that zoom out a little bit and look at your staff. The person who's racking and wiring and all that stuff, should they be the ones who are training the faculty that are doing this thing? And oftentimes, how many times has it just fallen on the install tech staff to be the ones showing people how to use the things?
Or the programmer.
Right,
it's
or the programmer.
usually
It's like,
because the faculty walk in on the programmer as he's developed. Oh, yeah, you just do this, and
and
you're
it's like,
done.
That doesn't,
But
that
the
does not
programmer needs to
constitute
feel the pain
training.
too.
They need to be aware, yes, of the pain and suffering that's going on in there. But this whole like training thing, it's like, that shouldn't just be another duty as assigned to one of your technicians, because it's so important, because it is really going to set the stage for the success in a classroom. And if one thing I've seen over the last 18 months, whatever, well, those buzzwords we keep throwing around, is that we have seen an increase in requests for on-site technology trainings. We had Lawrence on our show last year at one point. He does a lot of that coordination, and he has just been inundated. Day in and day out, he is in classrooms with faculty who have recognized that there has to be a better way. And with all of this additional technology tools that it's in a class, they've at least reached out and said, hey, could you meet me in the room so I can go through this? And he doesn't just show them how to turn things on. He joins. He makes a session. He's like, and this is what you look like to the student on the far end, right? He lets them experience that in real time so they understand what it looks like for them to be hiding in the corner of the front of the room or sharing this with microscopic font on there. So it's like understanding that experience. And sometimes that's the first time the faculty have ever seen that. Right? They just assume this is all stuff, but we're seeing an uptick, like day over day, more and more of these requests. We thought it was just like maybe it's just a pandemic thing, but now it's every day. We're getting tons of training requests.
And to answer that original question is like, no, those folks shouldn't be doing these trainings, but because they're the first responders, they're the ones doing their trainings, right?
To be fair, Jamie, in a lot of places, those are the only responders.
Yes, the only responders. And, and they're doing the best they can. I have actually... I need another duty as assigned. I've been telling them, once you realize that the tech is working and that it is outside your realm of expertise, immediately start shoveling I got a guy, I know a lady. Let's get you hooked up with them and we'll go through it because technically this stuff works, but I don't know how to teach, so I can't help you. Mm-hmm. But to do that, to try to negate some of the I'm just pissed off and you can't help me part, or the wrong trainings, right? The wrong response. But I don't need another duty as assigned. And so it's
too important to be another duty as assigned. It can't just be another duty. It in itself is too important.
Yeah. Going back to what Larry said, one key there is to have the training group, the pedagogy group, report to the same boss as the people building and designing and supporting those rooms. That's super beneficial because at Western, we don't have that singular boss. There's two different bosses. So there's a communication gap, right? And I almost feel at Western, we should be inviting the CITL group at Western when we're done with the project to train them. And it's not going to solve every problem, but what's going to happen over time is they're going to start asking things like, well, why the hell did you do that? Well, we did that because of this. Well, we need to change that. Great. You go talk to the department head that paid for this, that said they had to have it this way, and you explain to them why it's wrong for their teaching style. And that's not our job. And having that cohesion of we're all partners in this, we all have the same goal. So let's get to that goal instead of, well, who's training who? And I mean, with our training, we only train based upon requests. So we build out a room, we may not hear anything for a year. And then somebody puts in a ticket.
Nothing works.
Something's either broke or it's actually not broke, kind of circling back to our conversation of the right trainer being in the room with the right people, right?
Do any of your groups have like ongoing meetings with your CTL groups, where not meetings with them, but discussions or talks that they are actually communicating with faculty as like an open, ongoing, regularly scheduled program? Like our CTL group does like a teaching tech Tuesday every single week. We had
them years ago, and then there's some dysfunction and some duties reassigned, and it broke down. And we're trying to get it back, but we are not doing very well at getting it back.
So, Mark, if I understand your question, you're asking, like, does the teaching and learning team, whatever they're called at your school, do they do their own series of workshops on a regular
basis?
Yeah. So, and the group here does that. They have, I think it's every other day. So they got a nice training room, which we've built them, sort of thing. And so their offices are right there, and they have a couple of regular workshops throughout the week and also online as well. And I think they do stay pretty well engaged with faculty on campus. But maybe to your next question is like, yeah, we're not involved in those, and maybe we should be. Maybe we should figure out a way to like get more, build that partnership, because I think that there's a gap about, between the technology implementation and the pedagogy design side, but there's that space in the middle where right now the rubber meets the road.
So
And take
And
it
that's a
upon
good place to
yourselves.
start having the first responders attend too.
Yeah.
Not to contribute, just to be there
Just to
and
be there.
fly on the wall.
know the
Well,
people.
also-
Tell them the technology's working. So what the hell do they want?
Be a leader. I'm just for the hell of it, a year or two ago, I started joining their online seminars that they do live.
Mm-hmm.
And like, hey, there's Justin Rexing from the AV department.
Yeah.
Why are you here?
You
I
will
want
make
to
them
learn
feel
about what
so
you're
much
doing.
better if you were there.
Because
They're like, oh my
they
God, yeah,
asked
free
me,
support.
why the hell are you here? Because you're not faculty. It was like, I want to learn what you guys are teaching. And they're like, oh, that's great. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm trying,
So at the beginning of every term, I present with them. And the topic is what's new in classrooms. What have we done? And then a lot of the stuff is about the stuff we've been doing over the last 2 years, right? And we know what that is. But as part of that, they gifted me this little book. And I know you guys can't read it on the radio, but understand it's CTL Instructional Strategies. And this flip book, and it is so rich, right? And it has like everything you can imagine. And this was some of the first insight I got into like what they're instructing or coaching faculty to do well, right? Here's the strategies they're trying to use. So how does my technology align with this strategy now, right? And so now I can finally start to see, but being there, being more than just a name and an email, and knowing that you're a resource is really important because you're part of the same team that they are, believe it or not. You're there to support the faculty and the student.
Right.
And that knowing who you are and knowing that, oh, that's Justin. If something's weird, like I can get him, and then he has a staff to take care of it. It's like knowing and creating those relationships, or where you're making that conduit to have those conversations, to create these unique situations where you can do something you've never done. It's not a standard space or whatever it is, but if you're not there and you're not having a voice in that process, you can't expect that it's all one day just going to come knocking on your door. You have to go put yourself in there to kind of get to that conversation.
So if you're saying, well, we don't have a relationship with CITL, well, great, go fix that.
Go get it.
Just start by joining their webinars. Just start by showing up to one of their trainings, and they'll start asking questions. Why are you here? And it leads to a conversation, maybe down a good road.
Because I don't think it's up to either one of our groups.
Job.
Yeah,
That's why I'm here.
It's not up to one or the other to fix
Burn that
this
bridge.
gap between. Like it's going to take both sides working together to kind of hopefully define some of these best practices and how we do it. But we can only speak from our knowledge, right? We can only give them that information if we have the venue to kind of share that. And so if it's these talks, whatever it is, if you don't have one, start one. Go engage with them. Like get out there, have some conversations.
That's a good point. I mean, one of the things I have been doing that here is building that relationship. And to be fair, IT in general has a pretty good relationship with the teaching and learning team on campus. So that the foundation's already there. I've been building it from the standpoint of getting feedback on technologies in classrooms and general teaching things, like, for example, whiteboard cameras. I really want to make whiteboard cameras, and spoiler, I'm going to make whiteboard cameras a standard on campus because I'm just going to do it, and it's relatively inexpensive. And whiteboards, marker boards, chalkboards are not going anywhere.
No.
Despite everyone really pushing interactive, everything is not happening. Anyway, but
I will say this though, in closing, if you find yourself listening to this right now and you're a part of one of these CTL, CTIL groups or whatever it is, like I want to hear from you. What can we do as technology professionals to help come to the table to help define some of this best practice? And please, send us a line, do something like, I want to hear from you folks as well, because I think it's really important that we continue this conversation.
yeah, it's definitely one that is absolutely going to continue. I mean, the people, unless someone is operating under the assumption that, okay, in another year or two, we can take all this hybrid stuff out of the room and go back to teaching the way we were. But we just talked about in our first segment on the news article that's not what students want. Students, the average 18-year-old, it wants to come in and get kind of build these specialized programs and learn about them in specialized spaces. And so taking all that stuff back out of a room is absolutely not going to be part of the
Hear that, Justin?
the future. So
Oh yeah, I'm listening.
No.
I guess
the only reason you'll be doing that is because the contract ran out.
Yeah, I stay away from things with contracts because that is actually, Jamie, you say that in jest, but it's true. It's happened. So I have removed gear from rooms because there was no license fee paid, and so, well, then why is it?
Oops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's funny because it's true. We all put in these things, and all of a sudden that 2-year contract comes up real fast.
Yep.
Especially if, as in many cases, when those are initially rolled out, they're paid with special funds or one-time funds, or somebody else is paying for it, and then the bill comes due to your department. Yeah. So anyway, so any last thoughts on this gap between the pedagogy development and the actual teaching development and the actual operation of a space and the technology, there's still it's shrinking. I'll give you that. It's shrinking, but it's still there. And I think if nothing else, it's now exposed because so many more people are trying to use the technologies in these spaces effectively. So, which is good. It's a qualitative thing, but it is a gap.
Yeah, let's remember this conversation when we talk about XR.
Yeah,
about how the difficulties of training faculty to use the tech in the room. Let's just remember what we have talked about. We were all agreeing.
All right. Well, Justin, you raised a good point. I think we should talk about XR right now. Do you have a question for the AV Super Friends, a topic to suggest, or were we just really, really wrong on something and you'd like to give us a piece of your mind? Well, don't just yell at your computer. Send us an email and we'll actually read it. mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. We're always looking for good ideas to steal, discuss openly. And if your message is just full of great stuff, we might just invite you on the show. Mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. So a couple of weeks ago, and I guess depending on when you're listening to this, recently,
right now.
It's right now. It happened today. It's happening this second. We did a show where we had a segment called Technology on Trial, and we specifically talked about extended reality because it's becoming a big kind of buzzword. And we were like, is this really going to be a thing in the future? And so we debated both sides of that, and we talked about pros and cons of extended reality and what that means, and viability and scalability and all these fun items. And then we basically put it to Twitter and said, all right, AV Tweeps, what do you guys think? Is extended reality going to be a thing in universities and colleges moving forward? And we got some results back on that. And in fact, I'm going to turn this over to Larry because this was kind of his
he's our Twitter domain
his concept
owner
here, and he's our Twitter guy. So Larry, how'd the results of it? What was the results of our trial there?
Well, the majority of our audience was wrong. So I'll put that out there first. No, the overwhelmingly 60% almost said XR is going to take over as the next big thing in higher ed. And then we had a measly 20% that said it's not scalable, which is the correct choice. And then we had another 20% that said mistrial, better define XR first. And I can see that one too, because it might be the next big thing, but it's not going to take over in the way we understand it.
I think as a culture, we need to redefine what that is.
Define take over. That's another thing we have to define.
That's semantics. I think the defining XR is important because a lot of people, yes, it means strapping on a headset and going and playing whatever the Facebook lightsaber game is, which is what my nephew loves to do. But and we got some good comments back from people too. But Larry, I think fundamentally, I would agree with you. Yes, it's cynical to say, but 57% of our respondents are wrong in that this is not going to be a common scalable thing across the board. Now, yes, once you start really getting into nitpicking how I'm going to define extended reality and what it means to me in this very particular, specific sense, then it's extended reality and I can do this and that's this. But I think fundamentally what we're talking about is some sort of wearable special device, whatever that might be, whether it's a sensor that picks you up in a big 3D room or a or VR enabled room, or you're wearing goggles or something like that, or you're holding up your phone, whatever it is, it involves some sort of device and the specialized content to run on said device. And both of those things are few and far between in university campuses.
Since Mark is rolling his eyes and he was the victor, I feel like he should get his say here.
It wasn't necessarily Mark, but it was like Council Funkenstein's thing when he came and made this argument that I still firmly believe that it's about the experience of this, and people are still asking me. They still believe that there is a need for more of this in the classroom, and I think just for the engagement piece alone. And
I think it's a next thing.
Sure.
Not the next.
I don't think it's tomorrow. I don't think it's next week.
But thank you, Jamie. That's growing, the point I've been trying to make.
But the piece I want to make sure we're mindful of is let's not pretend that right now is tomorrow. And is it difficult right now? It absolutely is, because it's still maturing as an actual, the tool set is there. And to wedge it into our current existence is difficult. And don't let that difficulty say that it's not going to happen. The asks are coming in. It's a matter of how do we actually do it with the tool sets that are defined to create that experience. And I think is it hard to imagine that it's going to keep coming? It's going to. The future's coming, whether you like it or not. Now, I don't
not
think it's going to be.
discounting that.
I don't think it's going to be headsets and goggles all shared in a room. But I have specific projects right now where they're asking, like, "Hey, can you do a projection system on this for like landmass and piece and projecting onto sand?" And that's engagement. And that's a whole classroom experience they want in the geology department about that. And that is an augmented reality experience, like
Yeah,
projection
we're
onto
doing
these
that
spaces.
same
Really?
thing.
Yeah, it is.
Mark, you're talking about projecting onto a 3D surface instead of a 2D surface, but fundamentally, is that different from what you're doing in a boring standard classroom?
I mean,
right
they've
now?
been making golf simulators for 10 years now.
Well, I think there's the crux of the conversation.
We've seen VR
right?
since the early
Yeah.
90s. That's
Right.
that's
Yeah.
the big beef I have in this particular when you talk about
Exactly.
goggles and handsets. You're
I
exactly-
want to.
headsets.
I
Exactly
too
right.
want to get out of the goggles and handsets.
But
I want
that's
that
what-
removed from the definition.
I would agree.
I
I would
motion for
agree.
that. I want that out of the definition.
If we can redefine it without that. However, when you say AR, VR to most people, that's the first place they go is strapping functionally a phone to their head, and I can go visit Spain. It's like, no, not only are you so wrong, it's not worth responding to, but you've been wrong for 20 plus years, 30 plus years already, and you will continue to be wrong 30 years from now.
Yes.
I'm not
Thank
discounting
you.
that some sort of additional advanced visualization technology may work its way into common teaching spaces, but it is sure as shit not going to be heads-up displays and strap-on goggles and goofball handsets. And what was the Nintendo one? The
Power Glove.
The gloves,
Yeah.
the power
I like
gloves.
the power glove.
How long
And I
ago
think
was that? So
the-
I mean, my
fact
biggest
that we're-
problem
we're
with all
talking
this
about it as
was
being
it-
the
yeah, it
next big
big
thing. Like
thing.
it
Thank
is
you. Yeah.
literally tomorrow.
you
Well,
guys
it's
are
even
way too
though-
focused on the
Next
word next. I'll just want to point that out. Next big
that-
thing is a
Well, but
phrase.
that's-
Next big thing
that's-
means it's a coming technology.
coming.
Yes,
It is
but that's
coming,
how
and-
we displayed it. We said it's the
Yeah.
next. It's
It's
the,
the-
coming trend. It's the thing, and I'm like,
That's my
oh,
fault
it's
for writing it that
there.
way.
I'll be the first to
Yeah,
admit
dummy.
WKU
Jeez.
has a VR lab where we're teaching students how to create content for VR. We're not using these to teach students with.
And you just said it. WKU has a
One
VR
one.
lab. Yeah.
Gotta
So
start
what does
somewhere.
it mean when
You
you,
can't
say
have two
take
unless you have
over?
one.
In my head, when you say take over, that means more than half of my classrooms are going to be XR enabled by X amount of year. And that's, I think we need to define it. Does XR have
Yeah.
some kind of usefulness to education? Absolutely.
Next.
Well, and that goes
But-
into what some of our
It
listeners
does.
said too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of our
Yeah,
listeners said the same thing.
Let's look at the comments. Yeah, why don't we talk about some of these comments?
So what Aaron said is, he's defined, it's not about the HMDs, the head worn thing. Like, okay, Aaron, yeah, I get it.
No,
The
I think it's
definition.
fair.
No, I think he has a
that's
very
fair.
valid point.
Yeah, that's what I'm
those
saying. It's
caves
fair.
are-
No.
Yeah,
it's
Wait,
real.
Let's read his comment
Yeah.
and let's give him the whole,
Give him the
the
space.
whole shebang here.
Give him the oxygen.
So
Go,
Aaron
Aaron.
Peterson, who we know, and Aaron's a good guy, said, your podcast only talks about head-mounted displays, but VR is so much more than that. Caves or other systems that can involve more than a single person at a time have their place too. All right, now
Sure.
Justin.
absolutely.
That's a true statement. I can't argue with that statement. It's not taking over my classrooms, period. It is not taking over my classrooms.
But what if you had
Yet
a
it
space
has-
that was that just so happened to be called a classroom? Like we have a driving
That's fine, that's
simulator on
one.
lab that's a classroom. And
That's one.
Is the
And it
simulation
didn't take
experience?
over.
Is it coming? Are you seeing more simulation experience? Yes or no?
Yes, but it's not going to be more than 20% of my classrooms. It's
Hey,
not
Justin?
taking over.
Justin, I remember a Christmas episode where you talked about
Yeah.
wall-to-wall wallpaper
Yeah.
that was a display. In every room on your
Yeah.
campus was going to be these interactive things.
And that was a
And
wishful
actually-
thinking to make my
Actually,
life easier.
I'm starting
was
to
a
flip
wish
flop
list.
on this when you get out of the stupid gaming definition of XR VR and you think about it more in the simulation mode. Like we have a flight simulator, we have
Right.
the
you have
same
one.
kind of. You start talking about
It's not scalable.
yes, but we just spent a whole show talking about specialized systems,
And
specialized
how that's the next step.
classrooms.
The pendulum swinging.
Now, when we take away, and it goes back to Chris's thing, we take away the goggles and we take away this stupid headband
glove.
with the camera, the Hudley camera on the end of it on your face. When we take away some of that stuff and you look at it as far as even in fashion, right? The stupid displays where you walk up and you can see yourself in whatever they're
Yeah.
selling today. Or the Hellsberg jewelries uses you can put your hand in the box and see the ring on your finger so they never have to take it out of the case. When you start thinking
Well, that's
about
way cheaper than buying jewelry.
Oh.
yeah, well, it's way cheaper than
Saving
somebody stealing
thousands.
it. It took
Is
away
it?
all
Is
of
it? Is it?
it took
though?
away all of my my income because I just put that crap on my finger and I'm out.
Gone.
No,
Get you an
but
NFT diamond
I'm
ring.
flip-flopping on it a little bit, but I think the whole thing that we discussed in that show was all based upon the wearable kind of, because that's how we threw the define out. So
that's the commonly accepted. If you go ask 50 people on the street right now, what's extended reality, AR, VR, all that, they're all going to come back to, or not, the vast majority will come back to some sort of wearable thing, device, display thing. And you're right, Jamie. Within that definition, never going to happen. The larger definition of some sort of additional display thing, probably 20 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe. But
I think what Joe Way was pushing,
our good buddy Joe Way was saying the same thing.
Yeah, it's all about that hands-on, and for those, I absolutely agree. Like we've been doing XR hands-on stuff for a while. When I was at Indiana University, there was the architectural design group that had their VR, so you could walk through the space.
Sure. And did it take over all your classrooms? Did it take over?
For those specialized spaces, which is the next big thing, I think, it's going to continue to grow.
Let's go back 20 years. What's the percentage
of your specialized spaces?
12 years.
20%, 30%? It still hasn't reached 50%. Taking over in my head is 80 to 90% of my spaces are enabled that way. Define take over. I always go back to take over.
50%.
Maybe 50. Yeah.
I think
it's not going to happen.
My stance is the framework's still there already. It's already there. And let's actually read Joe's. He said it's not replacement, but adaptation.
Sure.
Not either or, but both. XR allows hands-on learning with what is it? Without ever having to leave the classroom or home. And that's it right there, right?
But does it?
But does it? But as we think about it, we're all kind of leading to this experience. We're bigger than the 2D experience of me just sitting in a room watching a singular thing. Is now I'm interacting with this content, right? We are now virtually or whatever it may be. Are the first pieces of that not showing up in your classroom right now? Like a projection system. Go back 12 years. You didn't have projector in every single classroom. You didn't.
12 years ago I did.
Yeah, we had them 20, 30 years ago.
Maybe overhead, but like it moved forward. Like, and now I'm seeing people coming very specifically. I want to develop content that can be used so students can hold up a phone and just have an overlay. The prerequisites for that are there right now in the classroom.
And to build upon what Joe's saying, like one of my biggest concerns with the new HighFlex experience is we are taking away all of the active participation from the students and making them into consumers of content. If this helps drive more active learning to students in and out of the space, then it might have to be the next big thing. Because,
just for engagement alone.
Yes.
It's not going to be the next big thing for every university. It's just not. And maybe there's going to be some universities like USC that 80% of their classrooms are going to have some kind of something in them. But there's also the have-nots and people that don't have the money. And I know things get cheaper over time. But, going back to our point, the technology in 80% of my classrooms hasn't changed really in the experience in 30, 40 years. It's a 2D display with sound.
But can I challenge that for a second? What would happen if there was a group out there that created this particular lesson for this course and then sold that? Your university wouldn't necessarily have to have all the equipment. If the student can view it with their phone in an AR environment, that would just be a piece of lesson that they would license from that company.
So, and that's where I was going to head. And I think part of it is what drove this recollection for me was the comment from Kevin Hartman that said, I can't wait for the day the teacher says, put on your goggles, we're going to the Battle of Gettysburg. It's not quite there yet, but it's coming. Kind of. 2 years ago, well, before pandemic, my daughter's my youngest is in this class in elementary school, right? And it's a project-based learning system. And we had to provide, like they signed up for the Google Cardboard thing. And they dropped in the Samsung device on the front of their cardboard goggles. And they would go to all of these places. And they're in elementary school, but they had to pay for the program. They had to get access to the Google Maps or whatever. And it was pretty chintzy. They didn't renew the thing. But it reminded me, it says, you know what? It actually is there. We do all carry a phone. And it was a cardboard thing. We had to download the printout and like cut it out ourselves. I mean, it was pretty economical to get into.
So I have even a more
flip-flopper.
A generic
I'm a
thing.
politician.
We've had faculty who have made presentations, really nice presentations, that just simply having a QR code that the students can come up, scan with their phone, and they are given an augmented content that is there on their device that is not the exact same thing. It is additional to the content that they're seeing, and they are interacting with it on their phones. To me, that is like steps in the right direction without they're not wearing anything, but they are actively interacting with this content with their phones based on that QR code, right? It's right
often
there.
referred to as the second screen concept.
Right, it is.
But something else course related.
That's the conduit of how we're getting there. Like that's
I'm not going to disagree with that. But I think, again, we go back to when you go ask people what XR means, they think it's a goggle to your head. And Jamie, to your point about the Google Cardboard classroom thing, which, was cool. How many of us did VR the exact same way 30 years ago?
Right.
You're
that
right
hasn't
on.
moved. But
and I think our whole show was based upon the wearable thing, and that's what the argument comes from.
I do want to throw out
talked about all the other good stuff.
I want to throw out a concept here. So, and Justin, you brought it up. Mark, you brought it up. A lot of spaces have a display, and fundamentally the four walls of a classroom have really not changed. Fundamentally, yes, we have better displays and better sound and better microphones, but fundamentally that hasn't changed in 20 plus, 30 plus years. How many of us who are all in on the let's strap headsets to every kid and send them to Spain? How many of them are just simply looking for the next thing because, there's got to be something better than a big projection display at the front of a room. So here's the thing. I'm going to do this. And Mark, you even brought it up. What happens if we don't even have that projection display and everybody has their own display? And then that gives us some more flexibility in what they can see, and that might remove some issues with viewing angles and image size and that sort of thing. And does that free us up to do more different types of content?
Is it not the ultimate personalization of your experience? Right.
So everyone's not looking at the same big thing at the front. So it has to be as generic as possible with as few words as possible so that guy in the back can read the same as the girl up front. But if everyone has their own display, whether it's their phone or there's goggles or whatever it is. So I think so many of us are looking for, and I say us in the royal we sense, so many of us are looking for that next big thing.
Game changer.
How much enrollment?
The first thing that comes out.
Yeah. How much enrollment do you need to lose before you do something radical like that? Coming back to our first conversation,
find out.
Like when your back's against it that much, when do you have to do something so crazy that like we have to take a chance? Like is that where we're really at? Are we to that point where it's like I want to make such a splash with an environment?
So,
could that?
I go back to the
10
whole
years
point.
ago. How many of us put in at least one room on campus somewhere that has 3D projection?
Not me.
We've probably all done that somewhere because I've done it at two
I've
different
done
places.
Raise your hands in your car right now.
Yeah, raise your hands in your car. Honk your horn. Yep. So these things come and go, and then you see how many of those things now that had special lensing and all sorts of crazy stuff are not used anymore, and you've adapted it to be a standard projection display now. So
we almost put in a 3D lab to view rocks, right? And it was a real thing, and we designed it.
It's cheaper.
Man,
just
special
get the rock
dual
there, dude.
projection,
Just bring the rocks
left right
in.
stereo type stuff. They didn't have the money, reality. And it was the only request in my 20 years at Western, and it never happened. And that's the way I see like my definition in my head of this futuristic XR stuff. Now, what Mark's talking about, there's universities, and I mean, Western does that. I mean, there could be teachers that are putting QR codes and doing that today that I don't know about, right? In our classrooms. That's realistic. I'm a realistic person. But when you're talking about the head-worn stuff and the specialized experience in the classroom with the specialized content, it's just not sustainable. It's just the same as 3D in my head, like you said, Chris. It's just, you got to draw that line somewhere in the sand of what's your definition of XR? What does it mean to you? And how sustainable is it to put it in more than 80% of your classrooms? What does that actually mean? Does it mean just students walking in with their own phone? Well, yeah, that's easy to deploy because that's deployed today, right? So it just depends on where you draw that line.
Yeah. So interesting enough, we had that same discussion almost 20 years ago when we were talking about, remember, clickers? And the question was, instead of having specialized clickers, what if students use their phones and they could text the answer in? And I had people raise the legitimate question of, can you rely on every student having a device that's going to be compatible? This is back in the old flip phone and candy bar phone days, but can you ever rely on that? So Justin, to your point, you're right. I think QR codes like Mark described and whatever is a good kind of step into that. But what does that mean for equity of students if you have a couple in the class who
don't have
an older
that
phone
device,
or I don't have that, or I have a flip phone, or whatever, hard to say. So
yeah, and there's a lot of students.
Headsets for everyone.
There's a lot of students, a lot more than you think, don't have that device that you would think they would, but.
We need to go around and augment their reality by forcing them to have a phone.
University is going to have to provide phones to students now.
I wonder how long till we see that, because we've heard about laptop programs and iPad programs. Are there cell phone programs or
it may be cheaper than you think?
So,
new revenue stream. New revenue stream. You heard it here first. Trademark, patent, copyright. SuperFriends.
Phones.
Publish it. Do it.
Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV SuperFriends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.